Can I be on the spotlight?
100 and...
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome on behalf of myself, Lynn Julius, and my husband, Lawrence. Welcome to this latest lockdown lecture with Harif. Harif is the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. We aim to raise awareness of the history and culture of these Jews, but of course you don't have to be one in order to join our lectures. Please do check out our website, which is www.harif.org, and sign up to our mailing list if you're not already there. And check out our sister website, Point of No Return, to keep up with the news. This evening is being live streamed to the Harif Facebook page, and there will be a recording. If you have any comments, observations, or questions, please do write them in the chat. I'm afraid we're going to have to keep you muted as there are quite a few of you. So the best thing is just to write your questions down, and there'll be an opportunity to ask them after our speaker has finished. So I'm delighted to welcome Richard Smouha here tonight. He's joining us from Switzerland. He will be talking to me about his grandfather, Joseph, and his great legacy, Smouha City. Now, Richard, or Dickie, as he's more commonly known, was born and educated in England, but used to spend a great deal of time, I believe, every summer in Alexandria in Egypt with his family. So I will start asking Dickie a few questions. Can you tell me, why is Smouha well known in Egypt today?
Well, I think good evening, everybody, to begin with. I'm going to take a slight step backwards, which I discussed with you, with your permission. I'm dedicating this talk, as far as I'm concerned, to a cousin of mine, Philip Seton, who unfortunately at the age of 72 has been taken away by COVID. I was very close to him. He was a page boy at my wedding, and at the end, with the last sentence that I proposed to say right at the end, is why I will give you the reason why I have selected this, which is a most unusual thing for me to do. Normally, I don't. In the meantime, I will start by answering the question to say that if you ask an Egyptian today, what is Smouha, he may well have absolutely no idea that it's a Jewish name, that it's it's never been Egyptian, or any of the family Smouhas, I think, have never been really Egyptian. But it is a football team, which is how he'll answer you. And it's a very well-known football team that was champion of Egypt. Nice little aside there, in 2014, and lies 5th out of the 18 teams in the top league. The other kind of aspect to show what Smouha is comes from my brother, who was checking in at Amsterdam airport some years ago, and the clerk said, did you know that your name came from a place in Egypt? And my brother answered, my name, no, you're wrong. My name comes from, the name in Egypt comes from my grandfather, Joseph Smouha, who built a city which King Fuad named Smouha City. At the time, it was 1/6 of the size of Alexandria and had 7% of its population, 24,000 Jews. So that is the main reason that I give for the answer to your question,
Right.
how Smouha so well known in Egypt.
Right. So your grandfather Joseph was born in Baghdad. So how on earth did he end up in Egypt?
He did not go directly, as some people think, from Baghdad to Egypt. He was born in 1878, and we don't exactly know why he was the family sent him to Manchester. In Baghdad at the time, there are several reasons to leave Baghdad and not many reasons to go there. One of the main reasons was to escape military service. Another one was that there was some very bad political manifestations which created a danger. It was an uncomfortable place to.
I can't get him on a big screen.
To live in and to plan your life there. So that's the only reason I can give. He never gave us a reason, and in fact, this is something which makes this kind of talk very difficult, is that generation and my father's never really talked about ancestry, but and we're always looking forward or to the present. And it's only in the last 40 or 50 years that we are building family trees.
Maybe next. Yes, so obviously that's one of the reasons why you wrote your book, which is the Smouha City venture, which you published about 6 years ago. Right, and here it is on the screen. So that what everyone's dying to know is how did Joseph Smouha come to build Smouha City?
Well, he went to Manchester, and at the age of 14, got a job as an apprentice at Barclays Bank, and because he spoke Arabic, he was seized by one of the clients of Barclays Bank to help him speak Arabic, to help him on the cotton exchange. And this Mr. Harif, who remained in contact, his family remained in contact for 3 generations with ours, and Joseph Smouha became his representative on the floor of the cotton exchange. By the time he was 21, he was already a well-known figure, very bright guy, must have been. And when he was 26, that would put it about 1907, he left the house and started up on his own. Then with the arrival of the First World War, he sold his company and sent all his employees to the war and put himself at the disposal of the civil population, so the government in England, in London. I think that covers that point,
Yes,
does it?
yes. So, yeah.
Shall I carry on a little bit?
Yes, please. Yeah. So he did make a trip to Egypt, didn't he, after the war?
Towards the end of the war, there was a financial problem in Cairo, and he was sent out there on 2 or 3 occasions. The first one in 1917 and the next one in 1919. And I think it was on the 1919 trip that he took a day off, or probably a few days off, and took the train to Alexandria. The train to Alexandria, we've got the map now, which says a lot. I can speak for quite a time on the map, but I'll try and condense it a bit. The railway line comes round from the right. The railway from Cairo comes round from the right and goes along the line here to the center of Alexandria, stopping at Sidi Garba, which is there above the name Hadra.
Right.
As he went past Hadra, he looked out and said, "What is that?" This Hadra was a little lake and a horrible, filthy, smelly, infectious marshland, just 4 kilometers from the center of Alexandria to Hadra. And he sat back and looked at this map. This map, incidentally, is a map from 1907. So it's very close to where 10 years earlier than when he went there. And he suddenly said, "Well, there's something to be done here." He said to himself, "I think that there's something to be done, and I'm going to follow it up." So afterwards, and I must interject something here, which lasts right through everything I say, and that is, somebody has left me an album of about 80 pages of newspaper cuttings from 1931 to 1938 or 9, and a lot of the verbatim situations have come directly from the newspaper reporting. And one of them was this. Apparently, he said, when asked later on, he was asked, what was your first reaction on seeing this map? He said, "Why, any idiot can see that this is a fantastic opportunity. This is not the first time that people cannot see beyond the end of their noses." And this was so typical. This comment is so typical of my memory of him, going straight to the point and a little bit aggressive as well. Anyway, this was the start of his thinking. After arriving in Alexandria, he followed this up and found out that most of the land there, and you can see that there's a kind of circle of land around the lake. Most of the land belonged to the royal family, represented by Prince Omar Toussoun. And he found his way to Prince Omar Toussoun and started buying, as early as his trip in 1921-22, started buying some of the land and getting in contact with Omar Toussoun. Most of that land and that area was bought by him by 1923, when he brought his family out from Manchester. That is my father's generation. 8 children, 5 daughters and 3 sons.
Wow, a lot of people. Yeah.
One thing which has a lot of importance of this piece of land is that the railway came in on an embankment, and there was only, at the time when he was buying the land, there was only one meager little tunnel to be able to get from Alexandria or outside the circle here into into the inside thing. So there was a lot of development to do. It was very primitive, extremely primitive. Now, one of the first things he did, and I'm jumping a bit here, but one of the first things he did was it was to find out, I've left something out, he discovered that the Lake Mariut, which is this big area here, was 2 meters below the Lake of Hadra. And he therefore realized that he didn't have to do any very complicated things, except what he did was dig a tunnel under the Mahmoudiya Canal, which is this thicker line there, which brings fresh water to Alexandria and has done since the early 19th century. Before that, it was a Roman aqueduct. And so he dug this tunnel and drained the lake and the marshes and everything until he had some land which was usable for living purposes and to build what turned out to be Smouha City. The drainage must have been enormous because it created a surface. Most of this land, which had water on it, of course, made that the surface was very much lower. And now I'm coming on to the beginning of what happened.
Yes.
Unless Lynn has a question to ask.
No, this is great. No, these were some terrific challenges that were facing him. They're sort of engineering challenges, really, weren't they? But I mean,
an engineering.
How easy was it to get the king's approval for this, or the royal family's, well, the regime's, the establishment's approval to do this?
Well, there was something which was quoted by the newspapers of how the discussion went. It was reported apparently to Omar Toussoun. Somebody said, Smouha wants to buy the land, take it. Joseph Smouha said, no, you don't understand. I am going to do something very nice with this property. Good idea, nobody wants it. You can have it for free. Joseph Smouha, no, I must pay for it because it is going to be a very exclusive neighborhood. Pay us a symbolic fee. Joseph Smouha, don't talk nonsense. So this gives you the idea of what you were saying, the complications and the challenges with what he enjoyed so much. Anyway, he had this problem of the lower level of the surface of what became Smouha City. And he got he gave instructions to my father, who he'd brought out from just after leaving Cambridge and just after winning his Olympic medal, brought him out to do some dirty work. In other words, the objective was to move around 3 million cubic feet of earth and mud from the surrounding hills on the other side of the railway embankment. And my father had at his disposal an old machine and a kind of lorry machine situation, but it didn't work very well. What he really did was he had 1,500 fellahin workers, peasant workers, who were available to do the land. He split them up into groups of 20, uncontrollable, you would imagine. But no, my father had this great idea that he went to the manager of the local prison and made an arrangement with him, paid, I believe, to rent some of the prisoners in there for murder and rape and goodness knows what else. And he put one prisoner in charge of each group of 20 workers. And he never had any trouble because the workers were scared stiff of a prisoner who was still in prison for violence or something like that, and they really behaved themselves. So for quite some time, my father would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning from the family house, which is there. Can my finger be seen?
It can't. No, if you could just describe, is it the left?
Can you see that arrow?
I'm the annotating because I've got to admit people,
Yes,
darling,
okay.
and I've got to manage the chat.
Can you see this arrow?
Can you give us an indication that is it to the left of the word Hadra or
To the right of the
right?
Ramley. Can you see Ramley?
Ramley, yes.
Ramley is very close to where the family house was.
Right.
So
it's
at 5 o'clock
on the coast.
on horseback because you couldn't drive. There's no road in this area at all, and he'd ride down and do a daily inspection of all these groups working with their 3 billion cubic feet.
I bet he never thought that his education at Cambridge would prepare him for such a thing.
No. But he did find time in 1930, and you have the medal somewhere. He ran for Egypt against Greece and won the 100 meters race.
How amazing is that? I know you have some great sports, in your family.
When you know the later history of Egypt, it makes it almost incongruous.
Right, so that is amazing. So so eventually the architects were engaged to build the city itself. I mean, how was that done, and how were they chosen?
Well, he made a competition with some prizes, which sound, with inflation, sound not very much, but in fact were quite well paid. And there were 12 architects who were invited to submit plans with a first prize, second prize, and so on. I think about 8 or 9 of them were from Egypt, and the rest was 2 Italian ones. I have the names, but if I go into the names, it's going to take too long. And I have the projects as well, mainly, partly because of the co-authors of my book, and Christina Pallini, whose specific subject for her thesis was Smouha City. And so, but if we go into this, I think we're going to...
We won't go into detail about it. Just a short diversion to your wedding, which actually took place in Alexandria when you married Sylvia. Very posh, very nice, and all the gentlemen wearing their tarbooshes.
Yes.
And the next slide.
Should I say something about my wedding?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
On the 21st of June, 1955, and I hadn't realized that the 21st of June is the hottest day of the year and midsummer, and I was wearing a very thick, very thick clothes, and apparently feeling very uncomfortable in the synagogue. These are the steps of Eliyahu Hanabi, the synagogue, and they're just arriving. My grandfather and my grandmother.
Just arriving. And of course, Eliyahu Hanavi is the great synagogue in Alexandria, which was recently restored.
That's the one, yes, yes.
Right. You must have been sweltering wearing those clothes on the 21st of June.
Very much so.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So going back to Smouha City.
yes.
Yes. So a modernist style was chosen, wasn't it? For
Yes. At the time, there was the craze to have garden cities. And the objective, my grandfather wanted something which was very ecological. He was really up to date on things like Letchworth and Hampstead Garden suburb. And there was later on a garden city in Cairo on the Nile. And the objective here was to have something along those lines with houses in up-to-date following the up-to-date fashion, but every house had to have a garden of a minimum space in respect of the house attached to it, to the garden. But otherwise, they were free to build or whatever the purchasers of the villas. The purchasers of the villas were obviously, this land was a nice, very high class society land, and the land was important to be bought before the building came up. I can give you some of the names of the owners of the village, of the houses, if you like. For example, the most important person to buy a house there was the King of Italy.
Right. Yes, we have a picture of his villa.
Important, he stayed there for several years and died there, and his funeral took place from that house.
So he lived in Villa Gella, didn't he?
Villa Gelli, which is that one, yes. That was his house. This looks slightly different from the other ones and obviously much bigger.
Much bigger.
But there was also the two princes of Hesse, the German Hesse. The Bulgarian royal family found that a lot of European royalty came there because I think all the real estate companies rushed to take their clients to buy a house on the land. As Chester Beatty was an American who is well known and who bought a house there. Jean Ampin, Baron Ampin, who is famous for having built Heliopolis, bought a house there, and also Baron de Romagnano, and the Comte de Bergolo. So there were also very many Alexandrians who bought houses there. There was a rush for this land, which was considered to be very exclusive.
Right.
Okay, can we go back to race course now?
Yes. And of course, a race course and golf course were built there.
Yes.
What can you tell us about those?
Well, I omitted to say, by the way, that my father and his brother Ellis, his elder brother, had been brought in right from the beginning. And while my father was doing all the dirty, muddy work of bringing the earth down into the hole that had been left by the drainage, his brother, who had become a barrister and had a French law degree, was given all the legal work involved in the various activities of his father, Joseph. And the same sort of thing happened after that. He was given the job of marketing what would have been known now, what is known now as marketing the villas and introducing the proprietors and making the arrangements which fitted in with the rules which would be drawn up for that purpose. And my father was given this job as a former Olympian medalist of looking after the club and creating interest in the club. What you see there is the race course, which he was responsible for, of course, and the golf course inside the ring of the race course. There were 8 tennis courts. There was a bowling lawn, squash courts, and the children's playground. And then behind the office, I think we have a photo of the
Yes, we
state
do.
office, actually. But behind that, that's it, yes, there. Now, the other side, this was this window with the balcony on the right was Joseph Smouha's office. And the other side was my Uncle Ellis and my father had offices. And this gave him onto a field, which was the Rio Riding School. And we have a picture, I think, of the 3 medal winners in the Del Rio jumping competition.
Yes.
Here we are on the left, the boy in the middle. This is 1947. The boy in the middle was one of the Tusun princes. On the left, I don't know who it was.
Brenda Carver.
Brenda Carver, yes. And on the right, at age 12, was the person who was due some years later to become my wife.
So she was already an accomplished rider before you married her, anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now, all this was not. I would like, actually, I think I might. No, I'll speak about the golf course later on, but at the moment, I'd like to just mention that the city aspect of Smouha was looked after as well. And my grandfather insisted on having a synagogue, a mosque, a church, and any other religion that wanted to come and have a center there, and a charitable center. He gave the land for this purpose in these cases, and didn't take anything for the sale. Because he was a great philanthropist, but tried to do everything direct with the people who were receiving the charity and who needed help. And the best example I can give is the fact that right from the beginning, he had one full-time employee in his office whose only job was to see and choose the beggars who were really beggars and not just putting on an act, and give money to them on a regular basis. So they would come to the office either walking or riding in a cart or something like that. And at that time, there were a tremendous amount of beggars in Alexandria and Cairo. And they would go regularly and collect their due from the man at this office. I'm going to jump a bit now to another situation which is similar, because it's the story of a mosque. Our house, which was somewhere away, as you've seen on the map, I pointed it out on the shore, on the sea. One day, the senior servant came to my grandfather and said, could he speak a little bit to him? He had a problem. And the problem was, he said, that they had a problem every Friday. They either couldn't get to the nearest mosque, which was a long way away, and if they did go to the mosque, they were late for the family dinner. And what they decided to do in the village at the bottom of the garden was that there was a plot of land. They had they collected money from the people of the village in order to build a mosque which would enable everybody to be on time and not have to go miles away to the box to the every Friday. And this man, the senior servant, came and said, we were hoping you might be able to find some kind of a solution, because there's no money left. We have the land, but we can't go further than that. We have nothing to build the mosque. My grandfather said, bring the imam to me. So the next week, the imam came in all his splendor to the house. And after some discussion, my grandfather agreed to provide the funds necessary to build the mosque. And from then on, the call to prayers always mentioned my grandfather's name as the person who had enabled all this to happen, which is a very nice feeling. I know that all our family felt that would come and listen to the imam calling the people to prayer at the Smouha financed mosque. So
that's amazing. Can we go back and look at the sporting club, the sports club? Because when it was first built, it was seen as competition with the established sports club, didn't it? I mean, how did they view the Smouha sports club?
They preferred not to view it, in fact. And there was a big political almost fight between the established ASC, which dated from the 1890s, but was a bit out of date, had buildings which stopped people seeing half the race. New buildings had to be built because there were new members there and so on, compared to the wide open spaces and the beautifully looked after Smouha racecourse. Now, there is a story which has been confirmed to me, but I don't want to stay on it very long. And that is that, in fact, at one point, my grandfather had wanted to, when this was all starting up, this disagreement, my grandfather wanted to become a member of the Alexandria Sporting Club, and somebody blackballed him. So he was heard to say, if they don't want me, if they don't want to have me as part of them, I will make sure that they will want to come and be part of my club. And so he built something which inevitably was going to be the #1 race course. But they negotiated a 50-50 agreement so that one weekend was, one on one course, and the next weekend was on the other one. In the meantime, if you look at the map, which we had right at the beginning, you will see that that there was a group at the Alexandria Sporting Club who had found out that there was a possibility of having a race course in Siouf, which you see next to Bramley. But of course, that was quickly jumped on and refused because it's too far out from Alexandria, and the traffic would have been terrible.
Right. And of course, there were many prestigious sporting events held at the Smouha Sports Club.
And in particular, the golf course, which was supposed to be one of the best in the Middle East. My father had taken a lot of trouble, and I was 6 or 7 years old. But it's one of the few real live memories I have of being taken away from Smouha City, where a very small plot of land, my father had planted 32 different kinds of grass to see the one which would survive the heat of the Egyptian summer the best. And I remember going around and taking notes about my father on the ones with the different kinds of grass. Uganda, a grass called the Uganda something was chosen as the best, and the result, of course, was very good.
Excellent. Can we go on to the war, World War II? How did that affect your father and your family?
There were four of his children joined up in the Royal Air Force. His elder brother became a pilot officer, but was invalided out. He had something which fortunately was not serious. The younger brother stayed as the equivalent of a private, an aircraftsman, and his daughter was on the secretarial side. My father had a more adventurous time, but not flying, because he was already into his 30s. And they only took pilots in their 20s if possible.
Were the family still in Egypt, or had you moved back to England during the war?
World War II?
Yes.
World War II, they were active on the Smouha was still being completed and built and so on. 1939, there weren't that many houses sold, etc. It was, and during the war, of course, it was even worse, very quiet with all this that had happened. My father, however, was given a job as a pilot officer in Middle East headquarters in Cairo, and he somehow came to realize that the air transport was not good. With empty planes from one airfield, there was, I think, 7 airfields around Cairo at the time, and they were not coordinating at all. So he got authorization from the Air Marshal to create a unit called Air Booking Center, where every plane had to report to Air Booking Center what its loading factor was. And this ended up by, he ended up by controlling all the air transport in and out of the Middle East. So it was quite a war, and reaching the rank of wing commander, which is the equivalent of lieutenant colonel. But other than that, and then my grandfather gave 2 Spitfires, completely, paid for the full amount for 2 Spitfires to be in his name. And I have inherited this one, which was the model of Smouha 2, given to my grandfather.
Hold it higher up.
Higher up.
Yeah. Okay. Have we spotted?
I'll stop the screen share just for a second so we can see it. Hold on.
Very heavy.
Now hold it up. Now everyone can see it.
You can? All right. This one doesn't fly, so it's very heavy.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
we'll go back.
Sorry, let's go get the screen share back. Sorry about that.
Okay, so
I missed out on, I was sure I had done, thank you, Sylvia. I missed out on something which happened actually much earlier in this discussion, and that is that earlier on in the war, and especially the North African part of it, a German officer, a dead German officer, was found in the desert, and on him was a list of 10 people who, when the Germans reached Cairo, who were to be hanged in the public square.
mm,
And number one on that list was my grandfather.
public enemy number one.
I created a lot of discussion at high level, and my mother at a cocktail party overheard two high-ranking officers talking to each other, and one said to the other, "And what are we going to do about old Smouha?" In the end, they said that he had to go to South Africa and that they would evacuate him, and he insisted on taking his family, which included myself, to South Africa, where I spent 4 months, 4 very interesting months before the crisis passed and we went back.
You went back, right.
We went back to Egypt 4 months later, but enough time for me to have my first term at school with the report, which shows 0 out of 20 in Afrikaans.
Well, thank goodness you didn't need it.
Exactly.
Okay, so you went back, and then I suppose we should talk about 1956 and the next crisis, really, which was when Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, and Britain, France.
To talk about Joseph Smouha himself at all.
Okay, yes, we can talk about Joseph Smouha. It's just time is getting on a little bit. But, yes, sure. If we can briefly talk about him.
Well, he was obviously a very exceptional man with very definite ideas on everything, including his way of life. And he would have fitted in, I was just thinking the other day, would have fitted in very well with what's happening in the world today, because his cleanliness was such an important element in his life that in one corner of the office, hidden away, he had a basin with running water put so that when everybody had, Middle Eastern people, they like shaking hands and kissing each other on the cheek and everything. And as soon as somebody had left the office and they'd shaken hands, he would go in and wash his hands and wash his face.
He would have been okay with the coronavirus, wouldn't he? He would have been quite
yes, exactly.
Hygienic there.
He also had a very worth mentioning that had a tremendously close relationship to King Fuad, King Farouk's father. And a little anecdote: when he went to see the father, the king, and when they'd finished with their discussion, he was supposed to get up and back out of the room so that he didn't turn his back on the king. And he was very proud of the fact that this didn't happen when he went in, when he finished the business, discussing the business with King Fuad. The king would get up from his chair, walk around his desk, and lead him to the door so that he wouldn't have to walk backwards.
And of course, you told the story of how Smouha City was named, because Joseph wanted to call it Fuad City, didn't he?
Joseph asked him to.
Yeah.
Joseph asked him to name it Fuad City, and he said, "No, you and your two sons have made this thing, and you've done it not with Egyptian money, but money which has been brought in from England, and you're the only people who have brought money in and done good for the country as well. So it's to be called Smouha City." When NASA came online, NASA said more than half the names in Egypt are French, Italian, Greek, whatever, because that represented what the population of Egypt was at the time. And he appointed secretary generals to go round and take out the foreign words so that everything was Egyptian. He had Egyptianized everybody. He was in the process of Egyptianizing everybody else, so that included the names. So when the sequestrator came to Smouha City, he said, city is not an Arabic word. We take city away. I never thought of changing Smouha. So Smouha, maybe the only Jewish name left, I don't know, but it's become Smouha now.
So after the Suez crisis, NASA proceeded to sequestrate all property belonging to British and French nationals, and actually expel these nationals. So what happened to Joseph Smouha then?
Well, fortunately, in some way, fortunately, the whole family, this happened on the 26th of September, I think, of 1956. And the whole family were out in Europe or somewhere else on summer holidays. And so everything was taken away from us and the family while we were there, and couldn't get back into Egypt because we weren't going to be allowed to come back without a special visa, and so on. Obviously dangerous also for us to do that. So with everybody outside, it solved itself.
Right.
And we lost everything, including personal belongings, which well, everything, you know, the spare shirt and the suit and so on. All we had with us were the things we'd taken to be on holiday. But there was a point also, I think around the year 2000, when there was a new decree that you could take out, that they activated it, and you could take out a number of private possessions. And my father got a telephone call, most unusual in those days especially, to say, you know, this new decree has come out and it has been decided that golf clubs fall into personal possessions. This was the secretary of the club. His name was Omar Bey Hamada, and he was formerly chief of police of the Alexandria police, very close to my father, who appointed him to this job. So my father said, what have I got to do? Oh, just a simple telegram. Please send me my golf clubs and sign it. And telegrams in those days worked, actually. And within a couple of weeks, you're supposed to have it. There's absolutely no problem. So 2 months later, my father was getting itchy and said to himself, oh, what on earth has happened? I must book a telephone call to Egypt, to Omar Bey. And you had to, in those days, you had to book the telephone call, which my granddaughter doesn't understand at all. You just, all you had to do is dial the number. And so he got on to Omar Bey, and Omar Bey said, oh, I'm afraid it's absolutely impossible now. I know I said that, but it's not possible. Why is that? Well, most unfortunately, the telegram came through, and instead of asking for your golf clubs, where there was the F was replaced by a D. And there was no way that you were going to get authorization to send golf clubs out of Egypt. So my father never got his golf club.
He never got his golf club. Of
right.
course, Joseph lost Smouha City, and NASA sequestrated it. But you did get a little bit of compensation from the British government, didn't you?
Yes, but this was, it was very small. And I calculated that it was probably about 3% of the value that they'd given to the land, which we received 12 years later, and went to, at that point, there were as many as 55 family members who were entitled to a bit of it. So it was not very successful. Big talking point where I think we were cheated out of quite a lot of money was that the Egyptians insisted on giving the land the price as if it was agricultural land and not building land. And of course, that price is 4 to 8 times what it was given.
Right.
Or the calculation.
Right. We are now looking at a picture of Villa Smouha. Can you tell me the story of Villa Smouha and what's been happening with that?
Well, in the year 2000, when all these new decrees came out, I discovered that we were told that it was possible for the family house to be given, etc. And at that point, I hired a lawyer, and he found out that it had actually, because it was outside Smouha City, it looks too big, but it was forgotten, and it was never sequestrated. And as of today, we have basically, I would say, the very strong evidence that they do not have any documentation at all. The National Insurance Company squatted it and then sold it to the presidency, which is today's problem. And the successive presidents of Egypt have all said, no, we like that house, we're keeping that house in the name of the presidency, and we're not letting it go. And you, the judge, if you make a judgment against this decision of ours, we'll have your head, or words to that effect. And so for the last 8 to 10 years, the hearing has been put off and put off and put off. The latest was this 21st of January, and I don't have the result of it, but the judge has used as a reason for not giving a judgment in our favor, he's used the fact that it's very difficult to put a value on this. There's a lovely garden, and at the other end of this garden was the flats. And my father and my grandfather lived in this house with the families, and the flats had his elder brother and family, and another an aunt of mine with her family. So, and on the other side of this house was an enormous swimming pool, down to the corniche, or the road, the seaside road, going from one end of Alexandria to the other. and then the sea.
Right.
Wonderful view from the three top windows on this side. On the right were my grandparents' bathroom, bedroom, and changing room. And then there was an enormous terrace on the right where you can see a kind of something sticking up in the air.
Right. So basically, you went to law to try and get the villa back,
Yes.
but because it's used as a presidential residence and Al-Sisi presumably stays there whenever he visits Alexandria,
That's right.
it was too embarrassing for the judge to rule in your favor, and therefore you've had all these years when the can's been kicked down the road, so to speak, and no judge is brave enough to make a decision in your favor.
Yes, brave enough is, I don't know if that's the right word, but some people would have said stupid enough.
Stupid enough, right.
But we have.
But you're not, yeah, you're not going to give up.
We have a lot of documentation, but we don't have any
right.
They have no paperwork. We lost. They started off by doing it in the Court of Ethics, and we lost that case. And then they cancelled all the decisions which had been made by the Court of Ethics, and we had to start all over again. Now, this is the most important competition, which, of course, I as a golfer feel is the biggest success. That my father, who's on the left of this photo, speaking to the person who helped him bring this together, that's Bernard Hunt, who was captain of the Ryder Cup in England, between England and America, and most of the names here on this board are among the best golfers in the world. For example, Bobby Locke, who is considered at one point as being the best golfer in the world with Sam Snead, who he beat 12 times out of 14. Didn't win, but he created a lot of interest. Panton was Christy O'Connor, and a lot of other names which at that time were among the top in the world.
Fantastic.
So there we are.
Yes, so there you are. So that Egypt has never managed to, recreate that whole atmosphere. And it's never really,
never tried to.
No,
even.
No, absolutely.
Never even tried to.
Oh, so that was.
I think my time is close to being up. If Lawrence's expression is anything to go by.
Not at all. No. I need guidance where to go next, because it's been a random move from one slide to another. I'm trying to predict. I thought you'd like your football team, actually. So it's
Should I close out a little bit now?
No. Yes, I think we're ready if there are any questions, if or comments. I think there was just a moment.
The one thing I promised at the beginning.
Oh yes,
the dedication of Philip Seton, who was our page boy at our wedding.
Yes.
And he unfortunately he was extremely successful in business, banking and business, but lost 2 children.
Oh gosh.
Didn't have a very good life. But he set up a foundation called the Sasa Seton Foundation in Israel.
Yeah.
And which pays for education of all children hospitalized in Israel, whether Muslim or Jewish. And this was the 10th year of its existence, and they have occupied and been successful with 120,000 children during these 10 years. So I just wanted to mention this sad story in a way, but
Very sad, yes.
leaving a memorial which is
Yeah.
worth much more than anybody can imagine. They have it has the children are at the moment being treated in 40 different hospitals in Israel.
What a wonderful memorial to him.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
So I felt this was the right thing to do. It's just 6 months ago. Was it 6 months?
6 months, and he died of COVID. Yeah. Okay. Hilary Thomas says that she's been researching the history of the Jewish community of St. Anne's in Lancashire.
Oh, yes.
And I think that was where, she says, that was where Joseph Smouha was living in 1912. And he set up the first congregation who met at his home. Did you know that?
I didn't know that he set up the first congregation there,
Yeah.
but all their holidays were there. It was like their summer retreat. And my father was actually born in a place called, was it Chorlton cum Hardy?
Gosh, that sounds quite fiction to me. Yes.
About a 3/4 of an hour's drive, I think, from Manchester, and on the sea. And they spent their summer holidays there.
Okay, how interesting.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
So
there's a gentleman called Sammy Salem who apparently met you when you were both in the Boy Scouts, I think it was.
I think it may probably be more the Wolf Cubs.
Oh, the Wolf Cubs, right.
I think 3 years as a Wolf Cub in that third troop in Gazera, and then 1.5 years or 2 years maximum as a Boy Scout.
Okay.
So
the last time you would have met would have been, what, 75 years ago, something like that.
Yes.
Thank God for Zoom, bringing us all together.
Exactly.
Okay, and Ariel makes the point that once the Jews leave, the country goes downhill, and that's certainly, I think, the case with Egypt.
The numbers, the statistical numbers that I receive are incredible. When at the beginning of the last century, I think there was only about, taking the statistic that at the beginning of the century, the 7% of Alexandria was Jewish, and that was 24,000 people. There must have been about 300,000 people at the beginning of the century. By the time we left, it had grown to 750,000 at Alexandria, and it's now, with all the extensions and everything, the Alexandria area is at 8.5 million.
Wow, yeah.
And the total population of Egypt is 105 million.
Yeah,
where 30 million in World War II.
I found Chorlton cum Hardy on the map. It's near Morrison's, in somewhere near Stretford in Manchester.
Anyway, and Hilary Thomas says that in 1912, the Jewish Chronicle reported that Joseph Smouha built a sukkah in his garden in St. Anne's. Yes. And that was the beginning of his city talent. Obviously an entrepreneur from the very beginning. Yeah.
I see that somebody has written Chorlton cum Hardy is something I didn't see the end.
It's a suburb, yeah, in the south of Manchester. Yeah. Okay, and Zahra, who's our visitor from Egypt, she says, being native Alexandrian, her grandmother bought her villa in Smouha City in 1950 for £120 at Sultana Malik Street and built her villa there. How amazing is that?
Incredible.
Presumably she doesn't live there anymore, or maybe Zahra doesn't live there.
Oh, no, I think left in Egypt.
How amazing.
Yes.
Right.
So,
yeah.
if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to comment myself on them. But
Are there any more questions?
Please type them in the chat.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if I don't think there are any, are there? I think everybody is so,
thumbs.
you know, sort of. Oh, did he ever return to Manchester? Thought that was coming.
Returned to Manchester. Well, I've been to Manchester. I visited the house in Manchester. Somebody in our family found the tree where my Uncle Ellis and my father had carved their initials on it when it was a very, very small tree, and now it's a very, very large one. My grandson, Jeremy.
The initials are still there.
My son, Jeremy.
How amazing, yeah.
Right, we have a question. Did you go to the Lycée Français in Alexandria?
Who said that?
Kim Cohen. Did you go to the Lycée?
No, he was educated in England.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I think you have a lot of relatives here, nephews and nieces saying thanks, Uncle Dickie. We always learn something new, Rosalind says. And just one last thing really about your family, that you do say that Joseph had 8 children, didn't he? Yeah, and of course they're connected to other prominent families in Egypt. Can you say something briefly about that?
About the prominent family?
Yes, like the Menash and the Agions and
the Menash.
Yeah.
My wife's family. My wife is descended from a Menash and an Agion, isn't that right? And the Menash family went to Egypt in 1795, and the Agions were there from 1810. So they were really established families that have become part of the country, and the Menash became very wealthy and opened schools. Did they open schools? And Jewish schools, and very, very philanthropic.
And a hospital and a library, I think.
The Jewish hospital, yes.
Yeah.
And then it was the Agions who opened an orphanage
and had schools as well.
And they schools as well, yes.
Yeah.
And a synagogue.
Very philanthropic, yes.
Yes, very much
so.
And it was the Menashes also got involved somehow. I never understood why. I mean, the Austro-Hungarian War.
Right.
And were rewarded with the title of Baron. Yeah. So the last Baroness de Menash was Sylvia's grandmother.
Right. Yes. And of course, they were very philanthropic in Israel too, or what became Israel. There's a garden that's named after him, I think. near Saba. And
George de Menashe.
that's George.
The Menashes, yes.
Right.
The museum,
Yes.
Israel Museum, Jerusalem Museum.
That's right, the Jerusalem Museum. Mhm.
There is a question, was there a department store named after Smouha?
In Egypt or in
Yeah.
No.
Or
in
not?
Israel?
No. Okay, and
There was
lots of people saying nice things.
yes.
There will be a recording, yes.
Hmm?
I already answered that one.
And Zahra says that Joseph is still well remembered in Alexandria. That's nice to know and respected.
Of course, as time goes on, and the changes in Egypt in particular are enormous. It just gets lost in the mass of people. I don't understand how that country can live with over 100 million population and with no money other than what they get from the US and one or two other countries, there is a possibility, I suppose, somewhere along the line that now they're building a new capital 45 kilometers away from Cairo.
Is that so?
Desert. And that could go on for some time. There's plenty of desert around. But it's all supported by the Nile, and one river.
Yes.
To keep 100 million people alive. It's a bit heavy.
Yes, tall order. And Claudie, David, thanks you for this interesting presentation. They were members of the Smouha Club and have wonderful memories of their time spent there. And lots of people thanking you for a really interesting presentation. There's a gentleman called Ami Samoha. He says he's a Smouha living in Israel and would love to meet relatives. His grandfather is also named Joseph Smouha from Baghdad. Please contact me. Thanks.
Ami, if you want to put your email into the chat box, just send it to me as the host, to Lawrence. I will pass that on.
Can we save the chat?
I'll save the chat.
Yeah.
But if you just send it to me, so it's private. So just send it to Lawrence Julius, and I will pass it on.
There are a fair number of Smouhas living in Israel. The one who has been there in a sense the longest and well known is a professor at Haifa University, and he's professor of ethnic groups.
Yes, I think we heard him.
Very well known.
Sami.
Very well known. Sami Smouha.
Yeah. He's related?
Third cousin, yes.
Third cousin.
Okay. Interesting theory.
So, and David, your grandson, asks, he's always been interested in going to Smouha City to visit. Is this possible?
It certainly is possible. And one or two of my grandchildren, Jeremy has been, and Timothy, and your daughter, our daughter Caroline.
Yes.
Yes, it is possible. Doesn't seem to be possible anyway, not easy, is for him to go and get the house back, even if it goes with a troop of his followers.
That's rather nice. Michelle says, you mentioned the mosque that Joseph helped to build. His bedroom, until he was 9, was close to the other end of the garden, and he used to wake up every morning with the muezzin. Oh dear.
Michelle,
Hmm.
was it?
Yeah, Michel.
Michelle.
Yeah.
That's Michelle.
That's Michael Adder. Michael
Oh,
Adder.
Michael
Michael
Adder.
Adder.
Michael.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Right.
It's
So-
the first cousin.
First cousin.
First cousin.
One of the
Okay.
Joining now.
Oh gosh. We
One
have
of
some
the
people joining.
23 grandchildren of my grandparents.
Yeah, and that's wonderful, isn't it, that they're here to listen to you. Okay, well, I think on that note we will wrap up. We've run out of yes, a group family trip should be on the cards, absolutely.
Right.
So it just remains for me to thank you so much, Dickie, for a wonderful presentation. And we have it on record for posterity, for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, and the one who's not interested yet. Hopefully, she will grow up to listen to your story.
Right. Thank you very much from me as well. I'm going to allow everyone to unmute
Yeah.
themselves if they want to say
So-
personal thank yous, but we still have over 100 people on the call, so it
So-
might be a bit of a smash and grab.
Yeah.
But
So I
everyone
just
can
want to
now
thank
unmute.
everybody for coming tonight and joining us. Just to remind you all that next week we go to Cape Verde to hear about the Jews who settled there from an expert. And I hope we will see you again for future lockdown lectures. Thank you very much.
And everyone can unmute now if they want.
Everybody.